By 2030, that's the number of insulin vials the world will need every single year. Right now, over 500 million people on Earth have type 2 diabetes. Most of them start with diet, then tablets, then stronger drugs, and for tens of millions, the road ends at one place, injecting insulin. Right now, that's about 38 million people, but in just a few years, that number is set to reach nearly 80 million. That's the scale we're dealing with. And the logic driving all of it is the same. If blood sugar is too high, lower it with insulin. If it's still too high, give more. If it rises again, give even more. That's not a treatment protocol. In any other field of medicine, that's a red flag. This, the synthetic insulin trap, is why type 2 diabetes management feels like a losing battle. In 1921, insulin was a genuine miracle. It took type 1 diabetes from a death sentence to a manageable condition almost overnight. But what insulin has become today, how it's made, how it's priced, and how it's now used in type 2 diabetes is a very different story. So tonight, I'm going to show you the biology that explains exactly where it went wrong. I have 8 published receipts from the peer-reviewed record. They are undisputed. Together, they prove something your prescribing doctor has very likely never explained to you. And then one more, a 9th receipt. I almost left it out because this one isn't about your biology at all. It's about your wallet and what 3 companies have been accused of doing to it. I put it back in because once you see it, you can't unsee it. So stay to the end for that one. Receipts 1 to 3 cover the trap, how the dose keeps climbing as it slowly stops working. Receipts 4 to 6 are about the drug, what synthetic lab-made insulin does inside your body that natural insulin doesn't. Receipt 7 covers the money, a trail on pricing. And then finally, receipt 8 is about the origin, why the modern diet broke a biological design that worked for hundreds of thousands of years. At the end, I'll give you 8 questions to force a straight answer from any doctor, plus 4 doors you can walk through to take back control of your health. But before the first receipt, you need the map. So stop the video right now, go to the link in your description and download your free 90-day cellular repair guide. Open it to the 90-day scorecard. It's the tool you'll use to track your own case as we go through this evidence together. And if you've ever switched from one insulin to another without a full clinical explanation, comment switched below. I'm tracking how many people this applies to, and I will be reading every single one. Okay, before we hit receipt 1, let me show you the mechanism. Not what the textbook says, but what the published evidence shows happens to your cells when there's far too much insulin day after day. Picture a fire. You throw water on it, but the fire keeps coming back. So you keep throwing more water without ever asking who keeps lighting the fire. That's the current logic of diabetes management. It never asks the one question that matters. Why does your blood sugar keep climbing in the first place? Medicine calls this insulin resistance. That name blames the cell, as if the cell is broken. It's not. The cell isn't broken, it's overwhelmed. It shuts its doors because the flood of sugar pouring in would have destroyed it. Your cell is protecting itself, and then that act of self-protection goes labeled as a disease. Think of an electrical switchboard in your home. When too much current floods a circuit, the breaker trips and cuts the power on purpose, right? To save the house. The breaker isn't faulty, it's doing its job. Your cell is the same. I call that a glucose circuit breaker. It isn't resisting you, it's protecting you. And the best question to ask is what overloaded the circuit. So before we get into the receipts, you're probably asking, what is a receipt? Well, in this investigation, a receipt is a published, peer-reviewed study. I didn't write them, I didn't fund them. My job tonight is simply to read them to you. Every doctor who's ever written your prescription has access to these. Screenshot the one that fits your case and take them to your next appointment. Because to understand exactly where the biology went wrong, we have to start with the evidence that shows how chasing a single number on your blood test can lead to a dead end. Receipt number 1, the ACORD trial. 10,251 people with type 2 diabetes. The goal was to lower blood sugar as aggressively as possible to an HbA1c level below 6%. Lower is better. That was the logic. And what happened? Well, all-cause mortality increased 22%. The trial was stopped 17 months early. Think of it like a cooling room. Someone tells you colder is always better, so you turn the air conditioning up as high as it goes. But people in the room start getting sick, so you turn it up even higher, and more of them get sick. The thermostat reading looked great. The people told the real story. That's exactly what happened here. The harder they pushed the blood sugar number down, the more people died. They were using the wrong tool, insulin, in the wrong way. And that move to give more insulin is still the standard of care today. Receipt number 2. Receipt 2 is about what happens when synthetic insulin works too well. There is a documented danger built into the drug itself. It's called severe hypoglycemia. That's the medical term for a blood sugar crash so deep that the brain and heart lose the fuel they need to function. This isn't just a low number on a monitor. It's a full-scale physiological crisis, confusion, seizures, loss of consciousness. And it's not a rare footnote. When researchers pooled 26 trials involving over 24,000 people, adding insulin nearly tripled the risk of a severe crash. Triple. But here's why that matters more than a number. In a landmark trial called Advance, a crash turned out to be one of the strongest warning signs of death in existence. Look at the evidence. Among the people who suffered just one severe crash, nearly 1 in 5 died during the study. Among those who never crashed, it was about 1 in 11. Same trial, same type of patients, the only difference was the crash. Why is the risk more than double? Because a crash puts a sudden massive strain on your heart, your brain, and the very cellular machinery we're investigating here today. In type 2 diabetes, the body is already overwhelmed by its own insulin. Pushing it even harder with synthetic doses, hard enough to cause these crashes, can end up harming the very person it's meant to help. This isn't a theory, it's published, randomized trial evidence, the strongest kind there is. In the cellular world, stability matters more than chasing a low number. That's receipt number 2. Receipt 3. A clinician named Dr. Joseph Kraft ran a 5-hour glucose and insulin test on about 14,384 patients. He didn't just measure blood sugar, he measured the insulin response. His finding? 3/4 of the patients with completely normal fasting glucose were already showing abnormal insulin patterns. The engine was already failing, but the standard glucose test was blind to it. This was published in 1975. We've had that early morning test for 50 years, yet a fasting insulin test is still not on the standard panel your doctor runs today. Here's why that matters so much for this case. Kraft showed that you can have perfectly normal blood sugar for decades while your insulin runs sky high, working overtime to hold that sugar down. But the standard tools don't listen for the insulin. They wait for the glucose to turn into a fire. By the time an ordinary blood sugar test tells you there's a problem, the fire is already alight and real damage is done. We've had the insulin test since 1975. 21 years later, the answer wasn't to catch the smoke early. It was to create a faster lab-made insulin to chase the fire once it was already raging. The test was there. The system has never put it on the standard panel and reached for a stronger drug instead. Here's what nobody in the clinic explains. Your insulin is incredibly fast and precise. Your pancreas releases it in a split second. It does its job and it clears within the hour. Injected insulin can't catch that. The older humankind takes 30 to 60 minutes just to start working and lingers for hours. So the timing with the human insulin is off. Your food hits your blood long before the injected version catches up. And hold on to 1/4 as we go, because it becomes the key that unlocks this whole case at the very end. Your insulin system was built for a world that no longer exists. We'll come back to that. For now, stay with the timing. Your pancreas makes insulin in microseconds. It peaks and clears in under an hour. Injected regular human insulin takes 30 to 60 minutes to start working and 2 to 8 hours to clear. There's a real gap between what your body does with its own insulin and what the injector kind does. That timing gap was the problem the drug companies set out to solve. Not the flood of sugar causing the trouble, just the timing. And the way they solved it brings us to receipt 4. Picture your own insulin as a key that fits the lock on each cell and opens it instantly. Injected insulin is a copy of that key, but a slow one. By the time it finally turns the lock, your meal's already flooded your bloodstream. The help arrives too late. So in 1996, they do what engineers do. They filed down the key. They built a faster version of human insulin called Lispro, or brand name Humalog. It opens the lock in 15 minutes instead of 60. But notice what they fixed. They made the key faster, but they never asked why the lock was jammed. It was jammed because the system was flooded with sugar it was never built to handle. A faster key does nothing about the flood. They simply built a faster drug to chase the spike, but never asked what was creating that spike. Receipt number 5. If you're still here, you know more than 95% of healthcare practitioners about what insulin actually does inside the cell. But the most dangerous receipt, the one about what happens at the cell receptor level, is coming up right now. Imagine a doorbell. If it rings 100 times a day, eventually the person inside stops answering. After a while, they remove the doorbell entirely. That's what your cell does when there's too much insulin chronically flooding your system. It reduces the number of doorbells. The insulin is still knocking, but the cell has fewer doors to answer. So what does medicine do? It brings the dose up. More insulin creates more knocking. The cell removes more doorbells. That's the trap. Too much insulin makes the cell hide its doorbells, so the insulin works less. So the dose goes up, round and round. Your cell isn't broken, it's adapting. The tragedy is that medicine reads that intelligent adaptation as failure and answers it with more of the thing that caused it. Receipt 6. The synthetic insulin drug Glargine, brand name Lantus, has a higher affinity for a growth factor called IGF-1. In simple terms, IGF-1 is a doorbell that, when activated over and over again, sends growth signals to cells. This was published in 2012. The connection to cancer risk under chronic use is in the public record. It is receipt 6. Receipt 7. Now the money. Between 2002 and 2013, the price of the most used insulins roughly tripled. Yet insulin costs less than $2 to actually make. Humalog went from $21 in 1999 to $274 by 2017. That's a 1,200% increase on a medicine that hadn't fundamentally changed. Around 90% of users were moved onto these pricier synthetics after 1996. A switch driven heavily by marketing, not by proof it saves more lives. When the dose that keeps climbing is also the expensive one, you're inside a system with powerful commercial reasons to keep you on it. Receipt number 8. We've reached the final piece of evidence in the main file. Receipt 8. This is the one that reframes everything you've heard tonight. It is the only receipt that explains why the other 7 actually happened. In 1994, 2 researchers published a paper that should have changed the way every doctor on Earth treats diabetes. It was titled The Carnivore Connection. Their conclusion was staggering. The human insulin system evolved over 2 million years of extremely low carbohydrate intake. For 2 million years, our ancestors' bodies only had to handle a trickle of sugar. Our metabolic machinery was precision engineered for that environment. Then, in a biological blink of the eye, agriculture arrived. Then the Western diet. Suddenly, we went from a trickle to a flood. 300 grams of carbohydrates every single day. Let's think of it this way. Your insulin system is like a high-end dishwasher designed to clean 50 dishes at a time. For 2 million years, that machine worked perfectly because it only ever saw 50 dishes. It was never broken. But the modern diet is now loading 500 dishes into that 50-dish machine every single day. What happens to a machine when you 10 times the load? Well, the motor screams, the gears grind, eventually the circuit breaker trips, and the machine shuts down to save itself from a total electrical fire. Now let's look at the other receipts through this lens. Receipt 1, aggressive lowering failed because they're trying to force the machine to run while it was still jammed with dishes. Receipt 4, they built a faster drug, a faster detergent to try and clean the dishes, but they still didn't remove the load. Receipt 5, the cells closed their doors. It tripped the breaker because it was the only way to survive the 500 dish flood. Your body isn't failing. It's performing exactly as it was designed to perform for a load it was never built to handle. This is the nuclear truth. You're being treated for a disease that's actually a healthy biological response to an impossible environment. Receipt 8 reframes the entire case. You don't have a broken pancreas, you have an overloaded circuit. Medicine reads that intelligent, life-saving adaptation as a failure, and their only answer is to pour in more detergent. They're trying to fix the machine without ever asking why it's full of 500 dishes. You're not told this. Your prescribing doctor was almost certainly never taught it, but it has been in the peer-reviewed literature for 30 years. You have now seen all 8 receipts, filed separately by separate researchers across 5 decades. They didn't know they were building a case together, but they did. And the case is this: when a biological system is asked to do something it was never designed for, and the response is to add more of the thing that is already overwhelming it, well, the consequences are predictable, documented, and they're here. But these aren't just 8 isolated facts. When you lay these receipts end to end, they reveal a biological sequence. In this file, we call that the 3 phases of the loop. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And here's phase 1, the flood. Your blood sugar is elevated because of the 500 dish load. The standard response, you're given synthetic insulin to force the doors open. Phase 2, the shield. Your cells, protecting themselves from the arson we just described, remove their doorbells. They shut the windows. Now you have so-called insulin resistance. Phase 3, the escalation. Because the sugar is still in your blood, you are given more insulin, a higher dose, a louder scream. This sends the cells right back to phase 2, hiding even more doorbells. Most loops in your body are self-correcting, like a thermostat. When the room gets too hot, the cooling kicks in and the temperature settles. But this loop runs in reverse. Every step you take to fix the problem actually makes the problem bigger. The treatment doesn't break the loop. The treatment is the loop. It chases the number on the test while completely ignoring the flood that's driving the entire machine towards a breakdown. And if you're wondering why a loop this destructive is still the global standard of care, you have to look past the biology. You have to look at the floor above the trap. Now that takes us to the bonus receipt I promised, the one I almost left out because of just how radioactive the evidence is. This isn't a study about your cells, it's the money trail. And it's why I have to be precise about exactly what the public record does show. 3 companies make nearly 90% of the insulin in the United States. In 2024, the US Federal Trade Commission, the government's own watchdog, didn't just express concern. They said they were deeply troubled by the role these 3 drug makers play in artificially driving up the price of insulin. The FTC warned it may move against them directly. The state of Delaware went even further. They filed a massive lawsuit naming these companies, calling the entire structure, and this is their phrase, not mine, an insulin pricing scheme. The state alleges that prices were systematically raised even as the cost to actually manufacture the insulin was plummeting. Patients have now joined the fight in separate lawsuits, describing a reality where they are trapped paying as much as $900 a month for a medicine that researchers have proven costs under $2 to produce. $2 for the vial, $900 for the patient. I want to be completely fair here. These are allegations. These companies deny the claims and have stated they intend to fight them in court. I'm not the one accusing anyone. I'm simply a detective showing you that government regulators and state attorneys general looked at this data and decided it was worth a high-stakes legal battle. The first 8 receipts explain the trap inside your body, the biological loop that keeps you needing more. This bonus receipt shows you that the trap has a second floor, an economic loop where the price of your survival has been disconnected from the cost of the medicine. You don't have to take my word for it. Every filing I just mentioned is a matter of public record. Read them, then hold the biology in one hand and the economics in the other. Decide for yourself who this system is really designed to serve. Okay, this brings us to the 8 sovereign subpoenas. Now, a subpoena is a legal document that compels a response. These 8 questions are the clinical equivalents. They don't accept normal as a complete answer. In this case file, normal is just an average built on a population that it's already unwell. You want optimal, not average. And your rank from this moment forward is Sherlock. You're a sovereign detective who masters their own biology to reclaim their health. You're no longer a passive patient. You're an investigator who knows the evidence and demands accountability. Take these 8 subpoenas to your next appointment. You might not need all 8. Start with 2 and watch what happens. Subpoena number 1. There's a major trial where pushing blood sugar below 6% led to 22% more deaths. Why is my target set where it is? And can you show me the evidence that this target lowers my risk of dying, not just my blood sugar number? Subpoena number 2. I've read that adding insulin can nearly triple the risk of a serious blood sugar crash. What is my personal risk on this plan, and what are you doing to lower it? Subpoena number 3. Is there a test that checks my insulin, not just my blood sugar, so we can catch a problem before my sugar looks abnormal? Why isn't that part of my standard panel? Subpoena number 4. Since I'm on a synthetic lab-made insulin, what is the specific clinical reason for that choice? And what does my body do differently with it? Subpoena number 5. My dose keeps going up. I've read that when there's too much insulin in the blood, cells respond to it less. Could that be why my dose keeps climbing? Subpoena number 6. I'm on a long-acting insulin, and research shows it switches on a growth signal in cells more strongly than human insulin does. Has that been taken into account in my long-term plan? Subpoena number 7. Is there a biosimilar, a cheaper, equally effective version of my insulin available? If so, why am I on the more expensive brand name version instead? Subpoena number 8. I don't just want to manage a number. I want to deal with the dietary load that's causing the problem. Can we talk about what that takes? If not, can you refer me to someone who can help me? So which of these questions are you most nervous to take to your doctor? Tell me in the comments. I'm tracking the most common roadblocks, and I will film a dedicated guide on how to handle the pushback. Okay, if your glucose is being managed but your dose keeps going up, you now have the receipts. But next, you need a solution. Open your guide to section 8. This is where Sherlocks choose their next step. There are 4 doors from here. Door 1, the 90-day cellular repair guide. Download it if you haven't already. The link is in the description box. Go to the 90-day scorecard. Rate each area from 1 to 10. Do it weekly. Stop guessing what's wrong. Start tracking it. This is how you build the evidence base for your own case. It's free, it's yours. Door 2. If you've done the dietary work, moved your fasting insulin, and something still isn't right, phase 2 in your guide is your next step. This step uses clinical stem cell nutrition, not a supplement off a chemist's shelf, but a clinically grounded repair protocol aimed at repairing what years of sugar flooding wore down. It's not about management, it's a repair protocol that gets you out of the trap. Door 3, book a case review. I look at the data they ignore. The system is built to monitor your decline, not reverse it. I'm here to map your repair. Book your case review using my booking link in the description box below. And finally, door 4. This takes us to the next file, the cortisol bribe. If the synthetic trap explains what happened to your insulin, the next file explains who gave the order. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And remember, if your glucose is being managed and your dose keeps going up, you now have all the receipts, you have the guide in the description box. This is your way out. And again, if you were switched to a brand name insulin without a clinical explanation, why not comment switched below? I'd love to track how many people this applies to. Okay, this file is closed, but the investigation continues. I'm Nineveh Daniel, the Cellular Detective, and I'll see you in the next one.